Same old man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. Why so serious? Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the In Session Film Podcast.
Welcome to this podcast review for October 7th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, for the beginning of our Saoirse Ronan Awards campaign. Yeah!
Is she getting nominated twice? She might get nominated twice.
She might get nominated twice, and I am totally here for it. I know we haven't got into the review quite yet, so I'm playing my cards maybe a little early here. However, I want it to happen. I want her to be nominated twice. I obviously haven't seen Blitz yet, but I want her to be nominated twice. I love Saoirse Ronan. I am here to champion her. People are going to get annoyed by me talking about her for the next 3 months, and I don't apologize.
I'm looking at her filmography. You know, it's not like she really went anywhere, but it feels like she returned from somewhere. You know, and I think most of what she has been in since Little Women and Ammonite, I believe that film was called, from 2020. She's made a few brief appearances in movies, such as The French Dispatch. And then, of course, people just forgot about the film Foe. I didn't even see it, but I heard some pretty mixed things about it. So this feels like a Saoirse Ronan vehicle once again, which is neat to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, I think we've told this story on the show before, but I guess to reiterate for those listening that didn't hear that before, like Foe was one of those films I was really looking forward to last year because it wasn't just Saoirse Ronan, but it was our boy Paul Mescal as well. Like those two in a film together, and I think it was this sci-fi nature to it. Like it had all the ingredients to be something that I was very intrigued by, and then the reviews come out, and everyone collectively was like, "This is the worst movie of the year. This is terrible." So I said, and
then I just never watched it.
Maybe I'll catch up with that later. Yeah, so I never did get to it. It also starred Aaron Pierre, who we all know now from Rebel Ridge.
Oh, yeah.
That would have been a film that maybe introduced me to him more, but unfortunately, well, I guess it worked out because us getting to know Pierre more closely with Rebel Ridge was probably the best way to go.
Oh,
and I do love that.
It awakened something in me because I have seen that trailer for Mufasa the Lion King a few times already, but I saw it again when I went to go and see Joker Folie à Deux, and all I could hear was Aaron Pierre's voice. That's all I can hear. It's like it didn't take me out of the trailer or anything, but it's like, oh, that's totally Aaron Pierre. I've learned to just love everything about that man right now.
Yes, I am excited for him and his future for sure. However,
Rebel Ridge, go watch that, people. Go watch that.
Yes. Circling back to Saoirse Ronan, though, she has been a little MIA since 2019. I know you mentioned Ammonite. I don't recall seeing that one. That one might be a blind spot for me, if I'm being perfectly honest. Or maybe I did see that. Honestly, now that I'm looking at some of the images here, I think I did see it.
Well, that certainly says how memorable the movie was.
Exactly. Did not stick with me. That is for sure. However, you mentioned she does have a cameo, and that's ultimately all that it is. It is a small cameo in The French Dispatch. I thought she was really good, though, in See How They Run in 2022, a couple of years ago. That was a really fun movie. One of my favorite surprises or overlooked movies of that year. But that's really all I've seen. I've really only seen her, because I don't remember Ammonite all that much. The one time. I've only seen her the one time since 2019 with Little Women, a film that I love, one of my favorite performances of that year.
One of the best films of that year.
Like her 2010s run was very good. Was very, very good.
Oh, it was stupid. It was almost illegal.
Was ridiculous. I know. it was quite absurd.
Yeah.
So it was weird. And because we started this show in 2013 and you kind of go on the journey that Saoirse Ronan went on in the 2010s, I felt so close and connected to her. And she's one of my favorite actresses working today, one of the
Yeah.
best of her generation. So it is just simply a little odd that I've only seen her the one time over the last 5 years. So I am extremely excited that she's coming back in a big way with, of course, the Outrun, and we'll see her shortly in Steve McQueen's Blitz as well. And while I haven't seen Blitz, yes, a lot of the buzz right now is that she might be double nominated, and I cannot wait to see
That'd be
how that
so
unfolds.
interesting.
It would be.
I would love to see that happen, and hopefully Blitz is really good to even justify it further.
I agree. I agree. I always love her, so I will be more than willing to champion that double nomination. At the very least, I will be behind her for the Outrun for reasons we are about to get into. So, without further ado, I think we can go ahead and get into this.
Let's go
It
run.
is directed by Nora Fingscheit, and it stars our girl, Saoirse Ronan, as well as others that come and go throughout the film. But it doesn't really matter because it's just her.
It's kind of a one-woman show. It's
It
not
is kind of.
literally a one-woman show, but it almost feels like one.
Exactly. So, with that said, if you're not familiar with The Outrun, after living life on the edge in London, Rona attempts to come to terms with her troubled past. Hoping to heal, she returns to the wild beauty of Scotland's Orkney Islands, where she grew up. And because we're going to get into this, there's no reason to hide it. By troubled past, they are specifically referring to alcoholism.
Yes.
She is an alcoholic and attempting to recover. So this is the kind of film we're getting into here. So,
Yeah.
with that said, Brennan, what did you think about The Outrun?
I also want to note, and I think you're in the same boat as me, JD, we have not read Amy Liptrott's
Yes. Yep.
2016 memoir
I've
of
not
the
read it.
same name. So this is a very personal memoir that she wrote in relation to her own experience with alcoholism that this movie is depicting. So we don't have that context. All we have is how it depicts those tropes, if you will, on screen. And I say the word trope very deliberately because much of what this film is doing narratively, thematically, emotionally, it is not reinventing any wheels whatsoever. We have seen addiction movies like this through and through since the beginning of time, before they were probably even making movies. They've been making movies about this. And even the way that these events crystallize for a lead character, we've seen this story before, but it's compelling to watch mostly because of Saoirse Ronan. And I think she really is the one that holds this movie together. We did talk about this jokingly, well, half jokingly, I guess, that this was kind of a one-woman show. It really does feel like one. And by the time the movie ended, I even started asking myself, I definitely liked that. I found myself mostly moved by it. Was I moved solely because of the performance, or was the movie also doing some of the lifting? And I'm still not sure if I know the answer to that question. I do wonder if this wasn't Saoirse Ronan and if it was any other performer, especially any other less experienced performer, what would have changed? I think the movie would have probably suffered quite a bit.
Okay.
That said, I do have to give writer and director Nora Fingscheit some credit here. What really helps the movie is additional context. So this is not her first film. She's directed a few films before this, but one of her more commercial films was a few years ago, the movie on Netflix called The Unforgiven, or Unforgivable. That says not to be confused with The Unforgiven. I still confuse it with The Unforgiven, but called The Unforgivable with Sandra Bullock and Viola Davis. That is not a good movie. You know, there is a huge distinction between a movie that's made for Netflix and then a Netflix movie. Sure.
Sure.
That is like a movie that's made but then put on Netflix, for instance, something like The Irishman or Roma. And then there's the Red Notices of the world, Netflix movies, right?
There's a huge difference. Yes, a huge difference.
The Unforgivable is kind of in that ladder. It is very much a director for hire kind of job. There's no passion or conviction to it whatsoever. This is a very different vibe than that. And I don't think the directorial flourishes always work, but by comparison to that movie, I feel more of an urge to give them a pass because it's as if she is trying to break out into something else. She being Nora Fingscheid, the director here. She is trying to do something else. It might be overly edited quite a bit of the way. But knowing that context, I appreciate that she's trying to find her inner artist here. That coupled with Saoirse Ronan's performance made me, I don't want to say enjoy the movie, but it did make me feel mostly enveloped by it, even if I don't think it's perfect in the end.
Yeah, I really like this film a lot. You are right. It is a familiar story, but I do think it feels fresh thanks to some fascinating flourishes from Fingscheid and her direction. I agree with you. I don't know if it all works, but she takes some risks that I deeply admired. And as you're talking about, yes, Saoirse Ronan, my God, she is incredible here. She is so good. It is a powerful performance that teeters from unhinged as Rona succumbs to her alcoholism to tender reflection as she wrestles with her choices and tries to overcome her addiction. The two of them here, I think, are utterly captivating, particularly with how they utilize nature as medicine. This is a film that taps into Scottish folklore. It reminded me a lot of Song in the Sea, even though that was getting into more Irish folklore, but similar-ish vibes. It readily captures the majestic landscapes of the Orkney Islands and the Papa Westray Island. There is an emphasis on the wildlife in and around those islands as well. The heavy winds of the area, the waves in the brutally cold water. Nature is very much a character in this film, and it is often breathtaking, but it's not just here for evocative cinematography. There is a thematic purpose to it. It becomes a coping mechanism for Rona, whether it be her father's farm and taking care of his sheep, or the odd jobs she has on the islands, such as listening for the corn crakes that might still be presiding there, or when she is tasked to go to the remote Papa Westray Island for the winter, where she develops an interest in seaweed biology, and you see her health begin to finally take a turn for her. It is really compelling to see nature become the nucleus for healing and recovery. It's not a new idea, obviously, but the specificity of it here is really unique for a movie like this. And when you couple that with a Saoirse Ronan, who gives such a raw and vulnerable performance, it makes for a really great experience. It is kind of tantalizing how you watch this and it feels like it's something that you should know quite well, and it is in some respect. But as I was watching it, it felt like it transported me to something completely new. And while again, I still don't know if it all works, I did feel transported. And that is kind of a miracle for a film that is ultimately about addiction and overcoming addiction, which, as you noted, we've seen a bazillion times.
We've seen many times, yeah. I mean, like there's a difference between calling a movie trite versus empty. I mean, maybe there's some trite things going on here, but the movie isn't empty. And it definitely feels like a movie that is almost ready to break apart at the seams, pretty much every step of the way, which I did weirdly find kind of compelling. I think what Nora Fingscheid is trying to do is mirror the headspace of someone who is suffering from alcoholism, the way she blurs the literal vision, the literal landscapes every now and then, especially during some of those flashback sequences. The way it's edited, the way that sequences, the way certain events play out, it's almost out of order at times, to the point that you may even forget where you are in time. But it doesn't really matter because the point is still driven home. And the way that nature is utilized symbolically, and how this particular setting sees nature as not just something natural and almost like a form of medicine, but also something kind of spiritual in a way. This is very much a Terrence Malick film in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Okay.
go as far as to say it's Malikian by default or that it's deliberately copying Terrence Malick. This is not like that Netflix film The Dig from a few years ago. It's not what
Yeah.
Simon Stone who directed
Yeah,
that movie.
that
That was
was-
that was a
yeah.
Malick riff through and through.
Which
But
I
there-
liked, but it was an
Which I
imitation
like.
for sure.
Yeah, that was very
Yeah.
much imitation. This isn't quite imitation, but there are sequences here that did ultimately remind me of Terrence Malick, especially in his films post The Tree of Life. Like I was thinking a lot about like Knight of Cups, for instance, and
Okay,
maybe even
yeah,
some
sure.
elements of Song to Song. Like just like the fluttery nature of how contemporary nature, especially in a more European landscape, can actually play a part in this story. And the way it's edited, the way the camera kind of flutters over top of sequences does kind of have that Malikian vibe to it. But it doesn't feel as controlled as a Malick film, which is a weird thing to say, but I kind of like that because I don't think the experience of alcoholism when you're suffering from it is meant to feel like you're in control.
Yeah.
So that lack of control, I think, is very purposeful, which is why the final sequences here, when we actually do find more of a smoothness to the narrative, is ultimately the emotional point that it's arriving to.
Yeah. Yeah. You articulated beautifully what I do really like about the film and Fingscheid's direction, because you're right. This film, the story is nonlinear. It doesn't follow a traditional chronology at all or conventional editing structure. It is very stylistic.
Yeah.
The editing, I do think, is quite clever, to your point about how Malikian it is, not just in terms of its unique style. It has these moments of inspired voiceover narration that even includes animation at one point, which might be this version's or this film's version of The Tree of Life, showing us.
I was just
like,
gonna say
the Big Bang.
that moment may have been a little bit jarring for me because it happens
loved
once
it,
and
but-
never happens again. but
Which
in a way, like, we talk about this a lot. I kind of like movies that have at least some jarring qualities to them, even if they don't
Yeah.
work. Like we're more receptive to
Yeah,
movies that
I
take these
love it.
chances now.
I mean, because again, if we're gonna bring up Malick, and honestly, I didn't think about Malick too much when wrestling with this film until now, but I think you make some really great points. And if I'm using The Tree of Life as an analogy here, we only see the Big Bang once in that film. He only goes to dinosaurs once in that film. Now it makes sense in the context of The Tree of Life, as I do think the stylistic choices here also make sense, even if we're only going to them the one time. It is jarring. It is absolutely jarring. It's not something that you see coming, but I did find it inspired. And I do think it works because of Saoirse Ronan's performance. And to your point about if it was any other actress, would it work? Maybe not. Maybe those stylistic flourishes would feel a little too disjointed if not for Ronan and what she brings to this film. But I think that voiceover narration does offer a pathos that is complementary to Rona and what she is struggling with and trying to overcome. And also, I do think the film is, despite all of that style and its kind of frantic editing, I do think it is honestly very clear in its storytelling. I do think it's it's not difficult to keep up with Rona's personal unravelings and reflections. It does disorient a little when Rona is reflecting on the choices that led to where she is. I thought that was a really nice directorial flourish. And to your point, it's why I appreciate, as the film transitions narratively into the third act and Rona begins to recover a little bit, the film's twitchiness does start to fizzle out and it becomes much more seamless. So the editing and the disorientation that might come as a result of these stylistic tactics that are brought here, it is meant to reflect the character's own emotional unraveling. So I do like how complimentary that is. It might not all work, but I at least appreciate those attempts. And I think it mostly works. I think it works way more than it doesn't. And another element to it that helps keep the timelines intact is Rona's hair color. It is
I was just
a
going
great
to say her hair
signifier as to where we are in the story. It's
Her
I
hair
love that
or
as
her
a
nails.
simple,
There are little like physical
yes,
touches with her that seem to showcase the like the disheveled qualities of her and how
yeah,
that cleans up as the film goes along. So
mhm.
you can pick it up in that way. It also it the costume design kind of works as like a bookmarking effort in some ways.
Yes,
Yeah.
without calling attention to those things. It's
No,
just
they
something
seem
that
they seem like
exists about the
natural changes in
character.
the character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're right that some of the twitchiness of the film is meant to be very cacophonous in a way that's disorienting and uncomfortable and hard to watch, sometimes confusing from a narrative standpoint.
Uh-huh.
There is one moment at the end which will be vague about how it crystallizes, even if you know this kind of story, you probably know how it's going to end from a narrative standpoint. It's not really
Mhm.
that clever in that way, but there is a moment towards the end where it does begin to reintroduce some of those twitchy qualities, but it's done so in a more symphonic way. It
Yeah,
almost feels like a
there's
form
an
of
ebulliency to it for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, and for the first time, the way it's synchronized with the music, it actually feels like a fully formed symphonic piece, like it's
Yes.
all meant to work together. And Saoirse Ronan giving this literal, like conduction
Yes.
of an orchestra. It
Yeah.
reminded me of Bradley Cooper and Maestro in a way.
Yeah.
It
It
is
is a lot of
extreme.
that.
It's
Yeah.
almost like an action scene in some ways. But despite the twitchiness of it, for the first time, it feels like there's actual cohesion to it. And it does mirror the headspace of its main character by that point, given
Yeah.
what she's finally embracing.
Yeah, it did. I know this isn't a film that many like. I do appreciate it maybe more than most people do, but it also
Mhm.
reminded me of August Rush in that regard. It's a little bit
Oh,
of
that's a
August
cute
Rush.
movie.
It
I
is
like
cute.
August
I
Rush.
like it as well. But yeah, it's a little bit of August Rush and Maestro with that final sequence, like a melding of those two movies. And you do
We
make
can be
a great.
cynical sometimes, but August Rush is adorable.
It is adorable. It's absolutely adorable. And there is something about the tone, because you're right, when that franticness comes back, it's not meant to mimic the disorientation that Rona is feeling in
Yeah.
terms of her addiction and the volatility, but rather the ecstasy that she is now feeling in terms of her recovery and the hopefulness that she now feels.
It's frantic
So-
without being frantic, which is a
Yeah.
weird way of saying it.
Exactly. So I do love that tonal disparity in terms of how the film brings that back. And generally, I just feel like the film is really tender in its expressiveness. It's obviously a beautiful film, mostly in terms of the visuals. At times, there perhaps is a harshness to it when it is trying to, again, evoke that the volatile nature of Rana. But I do love the tender expressiveness of this film and how the landscape, the nature, how that influences every decision that Rona makes throughout the film. And it really does, starting with, of course, a few scenes when she's on her father's farm and you see how comfortable she is on the farm handling the farm animals, the birth, the death, everything that comes with that. You can tell that she grew up on that farm. She gets on the boat, has this vivid moment of disorientation where her alcoholism starts to get the best of her. And from there, we know that London is something that she can never go back to, at least not at this current stage of her life. And again, inside of that franticness, to see how the film utilizes nature as a way to give healing and growth, coupled with Saoirse Ronan's performance, I found a lot of radiancy in this film.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the word tender, and I do agree with that. We talk a lot about the twitchiness of this movie, which I think is a really good word to describe some of the editing here. That was a really good word choice there.
Thank you.
But there are many moments where the film does slow down, and it just lets Saoirse Ronan talk to somebody naturally. Weirdly, my favorite scene in the movie might be one that happens pretty early on, where she's simply hanging out some type of store trying to light a cigarette and tries to talk to a stranger, just tries to simply meet somebody. She asks him for a cigarette and then tries to strike up a conversation in a very natural way any of us might try to to talk to a stranger. You might ask, "Hey, haven't I seen you before?" And then they have this quick little banter. He helps light her cigarette, but then he has to get going. And there's a brief moment, a brief pause on Saoirse Ronan's face as he walks away. You can almost blink and miss it. Her reaction to him walking away, this evoking of loneliness, is really palpable. It really does land. And there are many moments throughout the film where it not just slows down, but you almost have to try to uncover little ticks in Saoirse Ronan's performance that suggests that that pathos that we keep alluding to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another moment that I find striking, that is a great moment in this film. I also think of that moment with her father, played by Stephen Delane here, who is bipolar. We find out that he is bipolar, but there's a moment where he's having an episode, but she is on this island, this remote island away from her father. And he is starting to blame her for his condition and where he's at, which we know isn't the case.
Sure.
And it's a close-up on Saoirse Ronan as she is frantically on the phone. And again, there's something about her eyes and the way she can emote with just her eyes that is so striking. Like, there's so much pathos and tenderness that comes out just simply seeing her hear her father's words, knowing that it isn't true. She's obviously indignant in the moment, but she also is having this palpable moment of empathy for her father as well. And also being stuck on the island, there's nothing she can do about it. So like there's all those emotions happening in the character, and how she brings that out is it's just incredible. It's phenomenal what she's able to do.
Yeah, in case anyone listening hasn't figured out yet, Saoirse Ronan's a good actress.
Turns out she's really good. Turns out she's great.
And this isn't even one of her best performances. I mean, and that's not to knock it, but I mean, she's so good in everything. It's hard to really a ranking of her performances would almost be like a meaningless exercise, right?
But I do
think it's one of the better performances of the year so far.
Now that's what I was going to say. I don't know where it sits in her own filmography as far as her best performances. She's obviously given a lot of great ones. This certainly might be up there. Either way, it is one of the very best performances of this year so far, for whatever that's worth. She's absolutely terrific. I think at this point, I think she should be nominated for Best Actress for this performance. I don't know if that'll change as we see more over the next few months, but as it stands currently, she is incredible in this film. You know, again, because I think of the challenges of the familiarity of this story from a broad perspective, the idea of overcoming addiction.
Yeah.
But as I noted in my opening thoughts, and I do think the film helping her along the way, but I think a lot of it is her own work here. She makes this feel new to me. And I think it's how she interacts.
There's
with
a
the
visceral
nature around
quality
her.
to it that I've seen alcoholism told this way. I've seen it depicted this way, but I've never really felt it this way, I think is the way I can almost describe it.
Yeah, especially when I think of, and I don't always like comparison because I think then it just becomes I'm using this, I'm bringing up a film so I can downplay something else kind of a thing. And I don't, like, that feels egregious to me. I don't like it.
Yeah, that's
However, in this instance, to help articulate where I'm coming from, I think of something like Timothy Chalamet and that film with Steve Carell. I can't remember the name of it, where he has
Beautiful Boy.
A heroin addiction, I believe, in that film.
Okay,
I think he's also very good in that film. The movie on the whole, I do think succumbs to the triteness of that over. Like, that's a film I don't think is able to overcome the same hurdles that I think this film does in terms of it being familiar. And as good as Chalamet is, and I do really like him in that film, I didn't have any sort of sensation of, oh, this film this story feels new to me. Like I did not have a feeling like that with that film. Whereas this brings a different light. And I do
it's
think
trying to make you feel what that person may be feeling as they experience this type of addiction. Whereas a movie like Beautiful Boy, it kind of falls into the trappings of most unsuccessful addiction movies, is that they simply tell you about the addiction and you're supposed to just believe it. And it only, I feel like there's a visual component you can do to really get a little creative in how you depict that addiction so that the audience I don't love a movie like this, but a movie like Requiem for a Dream at least tries to do that too in a very different way. But like they're it's at least attempting that so that it adds a weird emotional layer to it.
I agree. Obviously, the nature aspect of this is a big part of why this film feels so refreshing and transportive. And also, I think about how nonlinear this story is. I also think that is effective because we're not watching Rona in her volatility.
Right.
The volatility comes from the flashbacks, right? Where we see Rona in her mess. And at times it is quite disturbing. You think of that moment at the nightclub. She has the argument in the apartment with her boyfriend. They both end up getting cut because of broken glass. That is a result of her outrage there and the alcoholism really getting to her. But Rona in the present, which is a lot of the film, isn't really engaging in any sort of volatility. There's one moment where she does succumb to it, but it's subtle, right? It's not as if she, I guess she ends up getting drunk, but it kind of stems from like just her dipping her finger in some wine. Like that's kind of all it stems from, but it's not as if she's constantly going back and forth. Like a lot of her in this film through nature and trying to heal and recover. And a lot of it is her on the other side of that hill. Yeah. And I think that's what makes the interactions with all these other characters who are often very aware. You know, you think about the interaction she has with her mom and the hardships there because her mom is very religious. Or I think of the interaction she has, and forgive me, I can't remember the actor's name or the character that he plays, but he's this older gentleman on the Papua West Strait Island. I think he has a little shop there that she buys her goods from. And you know, he's very charming and endearing.
What a sweetheart. Yeah, I wanted to give that man a hug.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they have some really endearing interactions, and we come to find out that he's also a recovering addict. And the tender interactions they have, I think are really great. Are really great to see here in terms of, again, Rona and how it complements her journey that she's on, especially when you think about nature, like people being a part of nature. Like he's almost like a part of that island, a part of the nature that is helping her overcome her addiction. And I just love how the film uses those things here.
Yeah. Some of the supporting characters here are well performed. Not even some of them. I think they all are to a certain extent, even if they might be a little bit underutilized. But even Papa Asidu, who plays Danon, I believe that's how I pronounce the character's name, who actually is her boyfriend in those past sequences. I think he's pretty compelling in a lot of those, and he's not a fully fledged character, but he doesn't necessarily need to be. No, he's really just meant to be, really just a cipher for the audience to understand Saoirse Ronan's development. That's really all he's there for, but he achieves that very well. And there are certain sequences between the two of them that are ultimately pretty moving, especially that hospital scene, I think is quite moving. And a lot of it is just the way his face lingers on her. And when she says a line like, "You want to go get a drink?" It's almost like he can't tell. Are you joking? Like, is that the way that anyone would react to that? Because sometimes in a moment like that, you might try to save face a little bit by cracking a joke, but you can't
Yeah.
really tell given the experience of that person who is maybe cracking a joke
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah.
And his face just doesn't do anything, and it says it all, and I love that.
It does. And I also love the expression there on Ronan too, because
Yeah.
it is that duality of I'm kind of joking, but kind of not. Like,
Yeah.
And given what she had just experienced, you wouldn't expect that to come out of her mouth. So it does come off as perhaps sarcastic, trying to break the tension.
Yeah.
But given who she is at that moment in time, is she also serious? Like, I think the film gets to have its cake and eat it too there, especially
Yeah,
because
maybe
of
a
the
little bit. Yeah,
performances.
that's fair. Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's what I really liked about this film. Like, the more I sit on it, the more I think about it, the more
Honestly,
I really like it.
the more we talk about it, I am liking it slightly more because I came into it thinking, does Saoirse Ronan do most, if not all, of the heavy lifting to make this work? Because I still think the film, from a filmmaking standpoint, it is at times maybe a little bit over edited to emphasize its points. But I do appreciate a filmmaker whose previous film uh, didn't didn't evoke this kind of artistry at all. At least
Yeah.
trying to find that,
Yeah.
and at
There's
least
an
try
ambition
to.
here for sure.
Yeah, but it's an ambition that at least feels like it's meant to mirror the headspace of its main character, and it's not just ambitious for ambitious sake, given the content.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it was just simply over edited to be an edgy and an interesting and well executed movie in that regard, but it didn't really match the emotional volatility we keep talking about, then we'd have a big problem here. It would
I
almost feel
agree.
exploitative, but it doesn't quite get that far.
I agree. I think it's complementary to Rona and her journey. I think there's a thematic purpose to it, and it has conviction. You know, we just got done talking about Joker Folie à Deux, if you want to go and catch that episode as well. But in that conversation, we talked about how that film introduces these musical numbers that Todd Phillips has no idea what to do with. And it's an interesting idea. Hey, let's turn this Joker movie into a musical. You know, that's kind of a bold move. Let's do that. How do we do that? I don't know. Let's just make it up as we go. Like, that's how that film feels. Whereas here,
It's
there
not making
is-
it up. Yeah.
they're not making it up. It is purposeful. We know why it's here. And there's thematic, narrative, emotional purpose to it. Is it maybe a little overcooked in the editing room? I think you can make that argument. I am more than willing to live with it, though, because there is a conviction. And when you couple that with Saoirse Ronan's performance, and it makes the film arresting, not disjointed. At least that's how it felt for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you. I'd rather take a filmmaker trying to do those things than not try at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's more successful here. Like, this isn't like I wouldn't classify this as like an ambitious failure, like a Megalopolis kind of movie.
No. This is
or
like
Cloud
this is
Atlas.
not like this is director really trying to cook, but they're not overcooking that they burn the chicken. It's not like that.
Exactly. It's not burnt to a crisp. Like, she doesn't completely stumble. Maybe the edges are a little blackened a little bit, but it's not. It's still very edible. And it's
but like, let's say you cook steak very well, and some people like the taste of it cooked well done. So well done.
so well done. But look, I think there's a lot of meat to this film. If we're going to continue with that analogy,
I am
I think there's a
officially
lot
hungry
of,
right now. We got to stop.
Yeah, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go have second dinner.
We had one breakfast. What about second breakfast?
I know. I say that to my wife all the time, and she is annoyed every single time.
Well, I say that to my in-laws all the time. They know how much I like to eat, and it's become a joke. So I showed them that scene from Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring, and they're like, "Yep, that's Brendan."
Yep, I know. It's great. Okay. Any other thoughts here on The Outrun?
No, I will just say once again, and I just did say this, so it's just beating a dead horse once again, but I am liking this movie a little bit more after we have gone through talking about it. I like when we have these kind of conversations. There have been many of these, not too far off from even just now, where I find myself liking a movie a little bit more just based on the conversation you and I have, and this is another one. So I came in positive, but I'm coming out a little bit more positive, which is cool.
Yeah, my final thought, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen the film, I would urge you to give it a go. Even though, again, we've seen movies about alcoholism and addiction for decades and decades now, I still think this is a refreshing take on that story,
Mm-hmm.
especially given the specificity of it. There is something about the Orkney Islands, the Papa Westray Island, that location, Scottish folklore, and how that's implemented here. That certainly adds an interesting caveat that you're not going to get with this story in the United States.
Right.
So I do like that, and maybe that's a little bit of a cheat code with this film, but it's what I do really love about it. It's what I love about Cartoon Saloon. They're able to bring in a culture and a folklore that we're not familiar with as ignorant United States citizens.
Imagine this as a Cartoon Saloon film.
I did think about it a little bit because, again, I was reminded of Song of the Sea. I was, I
Okay.
thought
Yeah,
about that. I thought about that film a lot with this movie, especially when you get to the whole animated bit of it. I was curious if Cartoon Saloon did that animation. I don't know if they did. I don't think they did, but
It's pretty similar. Yeah.
I thought about it.
Yeah, it's
You
pretty
know?
similar.
Either way, I love the ambition to this film, and I do love how specific it is with its location, and again, why that nature matters. That whole idea of nature as healing is
Yeah.
such a powerful notion here, and something that maybe sometimes we take for granted because we live our lives online all the time, and if you're like me, I live in the Fort Lauderdale area. There's like I'm in the middle of suburbia. There's not a whole lot of nature here unless I go out to the swamp, and I'm not doing that. So
I mean, we're in a couple days as we're recording this, you will be experiencing another form of nature in some way. So it's not
that's
always,
true.
it's not always the most pleasant of
It's
experiences.
not pleasant.
But,
Yeah.
but needless to say, I'm with you as far as there's something about getting outside, and even just like every morning, walking in the grass and just putting your bare feet on the ground that just weirdly like grounds you once again to emotionally and physically. It's a helpful thing.
Yeah, like there's a whole sequence in this film where Rona dips her toes in the freezing cold waters out in this remote Scottish island.
Yeah.
And like it immediately freezes her feet and she has to go back to the cabin to like warm up. But then like some sequences later, she's outside in her bathing suit and completely dipping herself into
It goes for a full on swim.
for a full on swim with a seal swimming up to her. And there is again thematic symbolism to that because of what the film establishes with Scottish folklore at the beginning of the film.
Yep.
So I love that shot. Like I love the film building to those moments here and using nature in that way. It's brilliant. I think it's very good. So
Yeah, it's a pretty moving film. Yeah, it definitely has a vibe to it that if you're willing to get suffocated by it, I think it will hopefully pull you in.
yeah, I very much was. I enjoyed it a lot. Saoirse Ronan, yes,
Double
gonna
nomination?
champion you.
Well,
I hope you get nominated.
obviously she's a lead here because, like we said, it's a one-woman show. Will she be a lead for Blitz as well?
No, I think
guess?
she's campaigning as supporting.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
That
that's
would
been reported already. So
Well, that definitely makes the likelihood more likely
Yeah.
if it were to go that route.
yep. So it's very possible she gets lead for this, supporting for Blitz. What if she won both? That would be fun.
That will probably not happen, but
Not gonna happen, but I would just love to see her double nominated. I'm for it. I want it to happen. All right. Well, with all of that said, if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say about the Outrun, you can leave a comment below. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, reach out to us. Social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. You can email us in sessionfilm@gmail.com. We have a review for Joker, fully due out. It was a really fun conversation. We went more into it than maybe we anticipated, but it was a great time.
yeah, I didn't think we would, but the conversation we had was like, we kind of have to go deeper into this. I think the discourse needs to hear this.
Yeah. I at least wanted to try to be open-minded because,
Yeah.
again, it is a film I'm firmly mixed on. I think there are good things. I think there are really bad things about it.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle, and I wanted to reflect that as much as I possibly could, and I think we did a good job of that.
I think we did too. I enjoyed the conversation in the moment, and sometimes
I
that's
did
what makes
too.
good podcasting
Yeah.
content.
Absolutely. So that is out. Episode 605 is out as well. We talk about the studios and their nonsense with their superfan focus groups. It's ridiculous, but we talk about it. As Brendan noted, the weather in the vicinity at the moment is a little teetering. Thankfully, my family, I think, is going to be okay because we're going to hit the we're going to get the outer bands of it, but we should be fine. For those in the Tampa area, though, thoughts and prayers to you all because
absolutely.
It's like currently it was reported earlier today. This is the 4th largest storm ever recorded, like in human history, like in recorded history, the 4th largest hurricane to ever be in the Atlantic. So it's a
I'm
huge
with you.
storm.
Huge thoughts and huge prayers for anyone that's going to need it this coming week, especially coming off the heels of Hurricane Helene. The timing of this could not be any worse.
Exactly. So if you're in the path of Milton, I pray and hope everything goes well for you. I hope everyone was able to vacate that needed to vacate. And hopefully the Tampa area comes out okay. Because this does look like it's going to be pretty devastating. So, thoughts are with everybody there. So, and at any rate, if everything is fine on my end, and I think it's going to be, we'll have Chasing the Gold. We'll have Women in Session out this week as well. With all of that said, Brendan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, here's a fun story. I didn't share this on Twitter yet. This is just very random. It has nothing to do with the Outrun, but I want to find an outlet to say it. I almost said it on episode 605. Since it's the fall season now, when I'm not watching new releases, I'm going to start watching some fall-themed movies with my wife. She is not a big horror fan, okay? So let's just put that out there. But I am trying to show her a few horror movies if she's willing to put in the energy and the effort. So that means we're mostly watching them in the daylight.
Okay.
So we watched The Shining the other day, and I have one of the funniest stories showing my wife any movie that I love came from showing her that movie. So keep in mind, here's the caveat, and this is why I want to be a little careful with this. She's dyslexic, so know that going in. There's a moment where it flashes on the door and it says Red Room. I'm sure you're aware of that. And she didn't react because I was waiting for that great scene that happens later. I said, babe, you notice the door with the writing on it? She goes, yeah, why did it say murder?
She knew it right away. Wow.
And I just babe, you just guessed like the big reveal of the movie. And then it gets to the actual scene in the mirror and she goes, oh, see there? It looks like Red Room to me.
Wow, that's adorable. She got it right away. She got it right.
Which I guess in a way kind of makes sense because Stanley Kubrick was dyslexic. Even Steven Spielberg was dyslexic. Some of the best filmmakers were dyslexic. So if anything, this is a promotional, I guess campaign, if you will, that like she's able to think in a way that's very unique, and most of those filmmakers are as well. So it's a really cool way of thinking. I just thought that was really funny. When I had to
that is really interesting. Oh, that's funny. God bless her. That's amazing. Well, with that, I think we'll go ahead and end the show there.
I just needed an outlet to talk about this random story.
No,
I might share it on Twitter.
That's what this is all about.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll get to more spooky stuff here in the near future as October rolls on. But
I want to show her Alien. But she refuses. She refuses to watch that one. She is scared to death of that. She's never seen it, but she's scared to death of the idea.
To even try it.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if Brendan can talk her into it or not.
Yeah, I'll try.
All right. With all of that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the In Session Film Podcast. Saoirse Ronan, the best. Generational talent.